to Adam Jardy. Steve.
Yeah, Coach, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. You've won, so many games and had so much success in your career. Just you come to a stretch like this, and it's got to be as maddening for you as it is for fans and players and everybody. Just what, in your experience, what can you do? With short turnarounds, difficult, but what can you do to try and turn this around? I know it's got to be tough on all concerned, but just, I guess, go back to work every day. What can you do, I guess?
Yeah, Steve. I mean, I think the biggest thing is, we've really tried to focus in on the areas right now that have cost us the most in games. And, there've been some consistent themes. There's been some other ones. I did think last night we had as good a play in stretches as we've had. And here, at least recently, I just thought we played really hard and competed at a really high level in terms of our just playing hard. I thought the ball moved well, but you look at some stretches of the game where we just weren't able to get enough stop or convert on some free throws, or maybe make an open look, and then a couple times force the issue when we were down 2 or 4, that just didn't lead to a good possession. So I think as much as anything, you focus on trying to clean those things up and get better at those areas. I do think our traffic reads and decisions were much better. We didn't play in crowds nearly as much. We kicked to the open man. I think we had a chance to probably have 14 assists last night. We ended up with 10. But we had some good, clean looks that we'll live with for sure.
Young guys generally seem pretty resilient, just their psyche going through this. And have you had to try to explain to people this is not ordinarily how this all works? We generally, don't have these kinds of issues, but how have the younger guys held up, I guess?
Well, as you know, Steve, those guys know the track record of our program. They came here understanding, the track record. So I think they were well aware of the fact that, we had performed at a good level. I think they also understood that there were going to be some challenges this year, but it's harder certainly when you go through it. I think they're in a really good place. We've had as good a practices here in the last really 5 to 8 days as we've had during this stretch. We've just had really good practices, really good life and energy, and the young guys have been a big part of it. I've mentioned Bruce being voted captain, but all 4 of those young guys have had really good just presence in practice. They really have. They've had some inconsistencies at times, but those guys have really practiced well, and their energy and their spirits are great.
Thanks.
All right, we'll go Adam Jardy with Clay Hall on deck. Adam.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for doing this. I kind of want to ask you about that backdrop that looks pretty neat there behind you. But like kind of going off of
it's my wife's. I'm in the basement here, so it's my wife's creation there.
That's really cool. Kind of going off what you mentioned there about like getting better ball movement, but just shots not falling. It seemed like, I think you had like 5 assists in the first 8 minutes, and then you have 5 the rest of the way. Was that more a product of shots not falling, or did they change anything the way they were defending you to take away some of the looks you were getting early?
Yeah, and I do think we had the ball stuck at times, Adam, but not as much as it had. And I just think it's, there are times certainly where we're gonna, do what we call drive to post, where it's an isolation in the post where you got a bigger wing. If you watch Villanova last year, they did a lot where their guards would drive to post. So that's not always going to be facilitated. That score is not always going to be facilitated by an assist. There's going to be other times where I think that, we'll just play downhill off of driving the ball, because that's been a strength of this group. That's where we've got to make better reads. But again, I do think the ball moved really throughout the game, with the exception of, probably 3 to 5 periods of the game, maybe a minute or so, where it wasn't one specific guy. There were just times where, we we got an offensive rebound. We shot it in crowds one time. Another time the ball didn't move and bodies didn't move enough. But by and large, I think it was good. And unfortunately, we just weren't able to convert on some clean looks. I thought Justice had a couple rhythm threes that I don't mind him taking. I really don't. I thought Bryce had a couple rhythm threes, one in transition that was a really good look that Bruce gave him. I thought Sean had a couple rhythm threes, probably one or two more that he could have passed up or could have taken that he passed up that we just didn't make. And then obviously our inability, when your margin for errors pretty, small when you're playing a good team, we just weren't able to convert at the free throw line like we needed to. But, looking back at the film, it was kind of what we felt like watching it is, I thought our effort was really good. And I thought our ability to improve in some of those areas was good. We just have to keep taking strides in the areas that I mentioned to Steve.
And I wonder, like, when you are going through a stretch like this and you're searching for, lineups and things that are going to work, like, what is the challenge of trying to piece it together from like game to game when you might have a lineup give you something this game, then the next game it doesn't. And, I'm sure it's probably hard to define roles when you keep losing as well. Like how does that all kind of factor into figuring out like who plays with whom and how much when, consistency is certainly valued, but also consistency when you're losing, you probably need to shake things up.
Well, I think as much as anything, you're looking at, it can vary from game to game. Last night I felt like Tanner had practiced really well, and I felt like he gave us a chance to maybe have some offense in situations with his cutting and his movement. But the reality is it's hard. It'd take too long to kind of go into all the details of what you're looking at. The reality is we kind of have, we basically have a set rotation of about 8 or 9 guys, and that 9th guy might vary on a given night between a couple guys. And sometimes it depends on what the other team's strengths are. And sometimes it depends on matchups. And sometimes it depends on, what you feel like you need in a given moment. There's when the players are in terms of their impact might be considered to be somewhat similar. Sometimes it's just who you feel like might perform better in a given practice or relative to a specific team we're playing. And all that goes into that and the thinking that goes into that would probably, bore too many people and take too much time. But that's the rationale.
All right, and we'll go with Clay Hall and Jack Emerson on deck. Clay.
Hey, Chris, thank you for the time. You were given an extension last year, and Gene kind of cut through some of the whatever you want to call it when he told Adam, hey, you're our coach for the future. How much has that meant to you during a really tough time, I'm sure? And have you had much discussion about the future and sort of him taking that heat off of the program for the moment?
Well, I think when you're in the season, Clay, you're so invested in each and every practice, game plan, prep. You're so invested in that. You're really, not thinking about anything else. You're in some ways oblivious to the outside world and what's going on. And, like you just are. It's the reality of it. So I've always, like I said, I've always, I've just have, great relationship and respect for Gene and the leadership here. And I know how much they want us to continue to grow. And I think there is a level of excitement about what this young class can grow into. We feel that as a staff, as hard as it is right now, and certainly are excited about, how we're recruiting. But the reality is it doesn't take the sting away from, the challenges we face right now. So I think what I could tell you is you're always, we're always in in concert in terms of conversations, but the focus really is on, preparing our group here. And, conversations that I had with Gene, there was an understanding, months ago about how we wanted to, not just how we wanted to shape the roster moving forward. And those conversations, they're not public because, they're conversations that you have, but there was an understanding there. And certainly some of the challenges we've had have been just that, very challenging. But I think if you were to come and look at our practice, you would see how engaged our players are and how engaged our young guys are. And that creates excitement about what we can finish here. And that's only our focus right now.
One other quickie, and this is the question I get the most. After starting 10-3 and having in position to win so many big games, and I know you've been asked this before, what do you think has happened? Is it simply, hey, we're playing in the Big Ten and the non-conference is the non-conference, but how would you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, Clay, as you know, 6 of those games were games we should win, that we were favored significantly. Okay. So you take out, 6 of those wins. In the non-conference, I'm not diminishing anybody we played, but, we just, we didn't beat a tournament team at that point. So there's I think, college basketball, and you guys are well versed in it. You understand that, the conference season really determines, in some ways, the maturity of your group, and it really puts a premium on just in some ways, your experience, your toughness, your ability to finish close games. And that's where we have really, I think, we've done some really good things in the past. This league is the deepest league in the country. And, you can point to the Big 12, but they have 10 teams, but it's the deepest league in the country. And I think the results early kind of get skewed because they're games you should win, Clay. Yep. And then the reality is it probably would have been different if we would have, been some of those wins against tournament teams that we played in the non-conference, we would have won handily. Right. I think that's kind of would have been a bit more of a head scratcher, but we understood that, the results can be a little bit skewed early. And we knew there were going to be challenges in the Big Ten, and our challenge now is to finish well.
Thank you.
All right, we'll finish up the last 3 here. We'll go Jack Emerson, Andy Backstrom, and then finish up with Griffin Strong. Jack.
Hey, Chris, in this recent stretch, we've kind of heard you and Zed talk about coming out with that
He's breaking up. I can't hear him.
Bite in that fight early in the game. Felt like you got can you hear me now, Coach?
I think I got you better now. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm in a office basement. So you and Zed in this recent stretch have kind of talked about coming out with like the necessary fight to start games. Felt you guys did that last night, but what do you need to see in order to do that consistently over the next 7-8 games?
Yeah, I do think we had that. And I thought, we've had it the last couple games, and, we'll look at, do we need to look at an adjustment to the starting lineup, or do we, we'll look at that moving forward. But I do think last night in particular, we did have a good bite to us early. And you'd expect that at home, to be honest with you, Jack. I just think you'd expect that at home. But I do think we had that much better than, say, we did in the Wisconsin game, when I just thought we were too listless early. So that was good to see. And I think the same was true really in the Michigan game. But again, there are just too many pockets where we have to improve in those areas we discussed. And I thought, again, there were some really, really good possessions throughout the game. I thought there were some excellent things that looking back now, seeing on film that were really good, but obviously areas we need to improve in.
All right, and then we'll go Andy and then Griffin. Andy.
Hey, Chris, it seemed like one of Justice's best games this season. I know he's had up and downs this season, but the last few games, it seems like he's hitting a little bit of a rhythm. What have you seen from his progress and just his headspace at this point of the season?
Yeah, like any player, the biggest thing for me with any player is, play to your strengths and impact the game in ways he could impact the game. And I think for him, he just took what the defense gave him. He's got to compete defensively on the glass at a high level. And if he doesn't do that, he's not playing to his capacity. His defensive rebounding should always be one of the best on the team. And if it's not, he's not as engaged as he needs to be. The same can be true for his offensive rebounding. So I think he was engaged on the glass. I think defensively, Justice can have some inconsistent moments, but I thought last night he was okay. I know people look, it's so easy to look at guys' offense, but there's another end that is so critical to winning, and that end often gets overlooked, when you're doing a recap of the game or looking at the game, and it's details that maybe it's hard to see if you haven't spent your life coaching, but there are real details that I think we have to continue to grow in. It's not just him, it's a lot of players that are important for us. And some of it's inexperience, but some of it's just, we've got to get better in those areas. So I thought he was engaged for the most part on both ends. I didn't mind his threes. I think sometimes he's taken some threes that have not been rhythm threes. I thought all three were rhythm threes last night. They just didn't go in.
All right, and we'll finish up with Griffin Strong. Griffin.
Hey, Coach, playing Michigan State here. Obviously, you mentioned that you talked to Coach Izzo recently. I'm just wondering, given that, you haven't had a stretch like this at Ohio State, how helpful have guys like that been? And have you gotten, had other conversations with maybe other Big Ten coaches or coaches in general that have had words of encouragement or helped you through this time? And what have some of those conversations been like?
Yeah, I mean, the coaching fraternity, Griffin, is special. And, there's certainly all the things that go into a competitiveness. And the reality is, if you're playing your friend, you're rooting for them to lose. But Tom's been an unbelievable in the last couple of years. It really, I think, has come to pass really in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, where I would consider him, whether you call it a mentor or a friend, he's definitely that, and he's been that for me. And he reaches out. I think he tried to call me in the second half of the Wisconsin game, and I obviously didn't have my cell phone on, but he just. I think he's obviously a guy that I listen to because, he's got incredible wisdom and he's been through it. And as you mentioned, we haven't been through a stretch like this. So when I haven't been through a stretch like this, really dating back to maybe my first or second year as a head coach, you are leaning on guys that might be able to just give you a different perspective. So Ed Cooley at Providence is a good friend that has checked in on a regular basis. Jay Wright is a guy that has been an incredible resource during this stretch. Tom has been phenomenal. And I could name a few other guys, but, they've just been consistent. And, again, sometimes it's a different set of eyes that maybe a senior game that can give you a perspective. Obviously, Jay's in the business of watching our teams play right now because he's had us a few times. So he can give real wisdom in terms of just what his perspective is. And he's also had moments dating back to Villanova that he shared with me where, they struggled. And I'd be foolish not to listen to those guys, to pick their brain. You can, in these stretches like this, you can listen to too many people too, and that can distort, maybe confuse you. So, as much as possible, I'd like to, listen to a few guys, but No one knows what this is like and what losing feels like other than coaches. So those three guys have been great. And, Ryan Day, he and I have been another guy that we've talked regularly with. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, Coach.
Coach, thanks for the time this morning.
Okay, guys.